Hello, Caesar here again, and this is going to be a big breakdown of my sleeping pad collection. But this is not a collection that just collects dust. I use these pads based on the different circumstances or situation for the given trip that I'm taking for wilderness backpacking. Now, a sleeping pad is one of the most important pieces of gear in your kit because getting a good night's rest when you're out backpacking is something that is very important, at least if you were to ask me, right? So I would suggest that you take this decision seriously. Definitely do your homework and research. Of course, remember that this is very subjective. I'm going to speak just for myself here. Everybody has their own comfort level, and everybody has their because not only is it comfort, we're talking warmth here too, especially in colder seasons, right? So keep that in mind, right? Now, I will say this, that if you are a less experienced backpacker or new to this whole game, right? This may be a piece of gear that would surprise you as far as the amount of nuance that's involved and the different types of pad. It can be a bit intimidating, so I'm hoping that this will help out people who I find when I speak to friends and family who are not as familiar with backpacking, especially like ultralight backpacking too, that when we have the discussion, like what kind of, sleeping pad to get, right, that it can be a bit intimidating, right? Do you go foam or do you go with something with air in it? And then there's self-inflating pads and then, fully, inflating pads. You have to blow up the whole thing yourself and all that, right? So I'll go one by one through the pads and explain why I have them and how I use them, and we'll take it from there. Now, I will start with the newest pad that I got, which was somewhat recently, just about last week. And I haven't had a chance to try it out in the field, but I will give my first impressions on it and explain why I got it, because as you'll see, I have many different pads here, right? Why get yet another pad? What specific role does it fill that the others don't? Well, I will tell you. This is the Gossamer Gear Airbeam sleeping pad. Now, there are rumors out there. When I posted a picture of this on my Facebook page, and I'll put a link below to my Facebook page, and I will also, now that I'm talking about links, I'll put a link in the description below to a somewhat older blog post that I wrote on my blog, where I broke down my whole sleeping systems from 20 degrees Celsius as a low temperature to, I think I go all the way down to minus 22 or like maybe minus 15, something like that. Anyway, check it out. It's got several of the pads that I will be talking about now in there, along with my sleeping bags and all that. Now, also keep in mind too that I am a regular backpacker. This is my big hobby. It's one of my favorite things to do in life in general. So it's, yes, I have, quite a bit of gear devoted to it. I'm also a section hiker that goes out all throughout the year. So it's nice to have, again, the right tool for the job type situation. But okay, back to my first impressions of this pad. Now, this is a fully inflatable pad with the horizontal beams, and it's very comfortable. I really like it so far, but obviously I can't give it a full review because I have not tried it out in the field yet. I hope to get a lot of good use out of this pad this summer, right? And that is why I bought it, to use in the summertime in warmer conditions, because I already have another summer pad, right, which I will compare it to now, which is the Nemozor short pad, which is a self-inflating pad that I've been using for a few years now as kind of my warmer weather pad. So why get two, right? Well, one is a self-inflating pad, so it's not as thick. And it's also a short pad. This is a size regular, so it's a bit longer. And it's also more comfortable, as I said, because it's thicker. So laying, for example, on a hardwood floor, my hips do not touch the floor on this pad, but they touch the floor with this one. I will definitely take advantage of trail shelters on the trail if I'm going on a marked trail. Then I will, I would prefer something like this or other pads that are thicker that I'll get to in a moment, right? Then something like this, which is not as thick. However, what other options do you have with a pad, though, like this that's not as thick? Are there advantages to that? And actually there are. For example, if you're going to, I just mentioned going on trail where there are shelters. What if you're going on a trail that doesn't have any shelters? Or what if you're going off trail and just out in the middle of the woods, blazing your own trail or following animal trails and all that, right? And here in Sweden, in my situation, I am lucky in that if I'm going bushwhacking out in the middle of nowhere, here in Sweden, what there is an abundance of is big, soft patches of moss. And it's very comfortable. In fact, so comfortable that if it's warm enough and if the conditions allow, right? If it's warm enough outside and I know that I'm going to encounter I'm going to have enough time to pick like the perfect spot, then I will take a straight up thin foam pad, because then the comfort is not as much of an issue, because I'm going to be sleeping directly on a nice, like thick layer of moss, right? Here, like I said, these things, you might not take into consideration right away unless you actually go out there and try different things out, try different trails out, try different locations out, go out year round. But yeah, so a foam pad also has other advantages over either of these inflatable pads. So let's get all three of these, because these are the three pads that are more for summer use. So notice that this foam pad is very thin, right? So it does not provide that much insulation, just a bit, right? And when you talk about insulation too, that's when yet another complication arises, which is R values, right? Stay with me now, because a thin pad like this, I've read different things online, but it depends on the thickness. But as thin as this gets here, you're looking at maybe a half, 0.5 R value. Which is not that much, but then again, if it's really warm out, you don't really need that much. It's just enough to stop your body from, losing heat to the ground. This pad here is about R value 2, and this one is only about the same as the foam pad. In fact, Gossamer Gear doesn't even list an R value on its website, but from what I've seen on other articles, people estimated it being, I've seen, 0.5, maybe 0.7, right? That's just based on the air inside, because it's uninsulated, right? But why have an uninsulated pad? Certainly, like some people might be saying that, well, why not always take this pad, because this is actually even slightly lighter. This one, as I said before, is 295. This one is 275. That's including two little straps I have on them. Why even bother taking an uninsulated pad? Well, here's the thing. There are also situations, again, now we're going to get into more complications, that may warrant taking two different pads. Now, some of you super ultralight people and, people who are, might be sticklers for taking things that you might think are unnecessary, right? Your heads are going to explode, but there are times when it may be best to take two pads, because what if something happens to your air pad? What if, in the rare event, granted, it, it's a rare event. I've been using my inflatable pads for quite some time, and I've actually been either lucky or careful or both, in that I've not had any of my sleeping pads like pop or leak on me. But this is a fairly, if you're to believe, all the discussions online, this apparently is fairly common out there. All right, but if that's a concern to you, then a foam pad is not going to let you down. People that use just foam pads, this is their go-to argument, their big point, and you have to give credit where credit is due. It's a very important point, right? Because it has to do with safety. If it's really cold out and you have a air pad and it springs a leak or it pops, right? That might, well, it's definitely going to lead to a bad night's sleep. But what if it, you're cold and hypothermia and all that? So it could, be a safety type situation. A foam pad, you're not going to have to worry about that, because you can't pop a foam pad, right? So there's that. Now, to have a redundancy on, say, a longer, I'm going to be taking this summer, for example, a longer section hike where it's going to be warm out, but just as a peace of mind type thing, because I'm going to be also going to a fairly isolated place. I'm going to be up in the mountains of Sweden, Norway, right on the border up in central Sweden. So I decided I wanted to not only have the redundancy of having two, pads just in case, right? So I have the foam pad, and by the way, the thin foam pad is very lightweight. This only weighs 80 grams, right? That's very, very light. But here's the next thing. There are other advantages of taking two pads. For one, this acts as my sit pad for lunch breaks or water breaks, or just when I want to sit and rest. And also, I talked about flexibility before. Because this is uninsulated, I'm not going to be too warm. I happen to be more of a warmer sleeper, which is hard to quantify in any kind of meaningful way, right? Some people are simply colder than others at night, and I've noticed too a trend with women and men that women tend to sleep colder than men. I have nothing to back that up. This is purely based on my own experiences, but I have also noticed that manufacturers seem to have picked up on this, and they have different ratings for men or women. But anyway, I don't want to get into all that discussion, right, on gender dynamics and sexual dimorphism and all that. But the point is this, is that because this is uninsulated, I won't get like a sweaty back at night, right, if it's, happens to be, warmer. And so I can either not use the thin sleeping pad under this, or if I use them together, it's not going to be that big of a bump in heat because R values combine when you use insulation, right? They stack. So you're looking at, if you were to add these both together, maybe 1 to 1.23 R value total, which is not that much, right? If I were to take something with a higher R value in the summer and it's super warm, not only is it going to be heavier, but it's also, it's going to be really warm underneath, and that will be kind of annoying, right? But yeah, I like to fine tune things. If you're the kind of person that's not into fine tuning and just wants to have a one size fits all type solution, well, let me give you a good suggestion. A good suggestion. Here is a monster of a foam pad. This is the Thermarest Ridge Rest Sole. Was it? Ridge Rest Sole, because it's got the reflective silver lining on the outside, right? This has got a very high R value of 3.5, if I remember correctly. I've trimmed this so it's more of a 3/4 pad, so the weight of this is actually pretty good trimmed. It's 330 grams, which is slightly less than my Thermarest X-Light. This is a classic ultralight pad. This is one of the best pads, period. I'll get to that in a moment. But this weighs 350 grams, this weighs 330 grams, again with the strap included, right? But this is foolproof. It's got all the advantages of having a foam pad. You don't have to blow it up, right? But we get into comfort. If you use this on the hardwood floor of a trail shelter, it's not going to be as comfortable as this. But both of these are definitely going to be better used in a cooler temperature or environment. I use either of these depending on the trip. If I'm going to be going in the spring or the fall, and I'm going to be going off trail, and I know I'm not going to be sleeping in a trail shelter, again, we're back to that situation where I'm sleeping directly on the moss, then I can use this, and also it's super warm, so I don't have to worry about that, right? If I know I'm going to be sleeping in a trail shelter, and comfort, is more of a factor, then I would take this. This is a 3.2, so this is actually slightly less R value, but overall, I would say this is warmer because this is a regular size. So you got my whole body is covered, right? And keep in mind too, if I were to go on a through hike, this is kind of rare because I'm a teacher by profession. That's what I do for a living. So the summertime is really my time to shine as far as backpacking goes. That's when I would do a through hike. But let's say for whatever reason I were to somehow be able to do a through hike in cooler conditions, in like the spring or the fall, then I could take, the thin pad as my redundancy, to use underneath the Thermarest. I've actually seen a fair number of through hikers in the United States doing the AT or the PCT or the CDT, and they take, I'm actually thinking, I'll give you a specific example. One of my favorite backpacking bloggers, Carrot Quinn, she opts to use a small Thermarest X-Light with a very thin gossamer gear, I believe, but a thin foam pad underneath. Not only are you getting a warmth bump in the R value, but it's protection against this popping, right? And if it does pop, well then hey, at least you have this to back you up. And also completely flat. I have read on testing and stuff that flat Thermarest, because of the insulation inside, even if there's no air at all in them, they still have a bit of an R value. I've seen from 1/2 to 1 completely flat, right? So there is the Thermarest X-Light. Man, I'm getting confused with all these pads flying around everywhere, right? Okay, but here's also another thing to take into consideration before I get to like my winter pad, which will be no surprise if you are paying attention here, right? But another thing to keep in mind is that for if a person doing weekend trips, because not only am I a section hiker, but yeah, of course I'm going to take, weekend trips where the redundancy is not as important, right? But oftentimes if I'm taking a shorter section hike or a weekend trip, instead of taking a full inflatable, pad and a foam pad, if I want to be careful, whatever, I'll just take a trimmed sit pad, right? This trimmed sit pad I've used quite a bit, where I will just, roll this up and put this on the outside of my pack. And I have this as my sit pad, and this only weighs like 60 grams. This is a thicker pad than the thinner one I showed you earlier, right? So it provides a little bit more warmth, like R value 1 rather than like half. And I can use this underneath, whatever inflatable pad I'm using. So there is that option. And you can get even smaller too. When I'm going like super ultralight, when I'm really pushing the limits of weight, then there have been times when I've either used no sleeping pad at all and slept directly on that nice bed of moss I talked about earlier in very warm conditions. That's rare. I've only done that, a handful of times, right? But there are times I've just taken this tiny little torso. This basically is just for my back, right? But I've taken this 40-gram, small piece of generic foam, right? But then, of course, again, you can use that in conjunction with your other sleeping pads. Okay, so that is worth, mentioning, right? The smaller sit pad in conjunction with a inflatable pad. And then now winter time. You're gonna need a really warm pad in the winter, and my choice is the Thermarest X-Therm. This is hard to beat. I mean, really, the numbers, the weight is exceptional. It's like, for such a warm pad, it's R value 5.7, and the weight, now the weights, I've remembered all the weights of every pad except for this one, because this one doesn't get as much use, because this is strictly my winter pad, but this is, I think, 450, 60, something like that, right? But yeah, in the wintertime, this is my go-to pad, and I love it. It's super warm, and it's got all the benefits of the, the NeoWear line, like it's not only warm but light, but also very, very comfortable. And when it's super, super cold, then what I did this winter too is use this little, sit pad underneath it, right? But there are other times I have even, check this out, yet another pad. Can you believe it? I told you I trimmed my ridge rest before, right? Well, here is the remaining like piece that I trimmed off to make it like three quarters or maybe 2/3, but this is the rest of it. And if it's super, super cold, then I will take this combined with this, right? You're going to be really warm. And if on the super rare event that something, pops this, because this is also a thicker material, so this is less likely to pop or get damaged. The X-Therm is just, a thicker nylon on the bottom. But then you have this as a 3.5 R value backup torso pad, right? I told you, right, that there's a lot of, different ins and outs to these pads, right? And I'm glad I finally fit everything into the video, I think. This is like my, I don't know how many takes, right? Because I like to do just one shot, one take. Well, I did many takes. One, you know what I mean? One shot. If you watch my channel, I don't have the time or patience or really care that much to edit, videos. I'm all about lo-fi, right? But I filmed this before and I didn't get everything. It was so hard to get everything in, but I'm happy with this take now. I got quite a lot in about the nuances, the different complications and ins and outs of sleeping pads, right? Insulated or not, foam or self-inflating or nothing. Or just go out and be crazy like me on occasion and just sleep on a nice bed of moss. Whatever you do, please be safe and have fun out there. I hope this was helpful to kind of unpack again a complicated bit of gear, but a very, very important piece of gear because you want to get good night's rest out there. All right, take care. Check out my blog. Check out, my Facebook if you haven't already. Take care. Goodbye.